I'm here with Louise, as you all know, and we're going to be talking about vision boards. So this is exciting. I've been on Louise's masterclass, so I know how brilliant she is with this.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, seems like ages ago now that when I first launched that. It was perhaps two years, maybe, something like that.
Gosh, is it really that long?
So I've been harping on about these vision boards for many years now, it seems.
I know, wow. And you know, it's funny. I know I said to you a couple of weeks ago, in fact, it's probably more than that even, but I actually saw in another coaching group a coach ask, does anybody know anything about vision boards? And another coach popped up and said, oh, get some magazines, find some pictures you really fancy, stick them on a board, your job's done. And I thought, oh no!
Don't. Could you hear my voice in your head?
I could. Like,
do you know what? That is one of the biggest myths for me around vision boarding, that the starting place is, well, I'll just collect a few magazines and, you know, have a flick through, see what I fancy having for the future. And it's really important that we do factor in those things that we want to have. But I think the reason why I decided to start teaching this stuff was really to help try and dispel some of those myths as well, and bring a bit more of a structure for people that they can follow. Because it can be a really powerful tool.
Yeah. It's not a matter of, oh, I fancy that yacht, I fancy that house, I'll stick it on the board, I'm going to sit on my settee and just wait for them to float in.
Wishful thinking, as I call it.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, what happens in our mind is part of the process, that creative process that happens internally. But actually, that's probably way more important than we realise. But then, of course, you've got the external part of the process, which is the doing.
Yeah.
And that's the bit that people often also kind of sort of forget about as well.
Yeah. Otherwise, it would be a bit like looking in a cookery book, admiring a recipe, and then possibly even getting the ingredients and then not doing anything else.
Yeah. If I just sit here and hope tonight that someone's going to cook me a 3-course meal, do you think it will happen, Jill?
I seriously doubt it, no.
My husband's actually shouting, no, it's not going to happen. Yeah, so I wanted to kind of, you know, dispel some of those myths, but create a bit of structure. So this is where the dream design do kind of came from. It was these 3 steps. Because also I do believe that, you know, the cutting and sticking, it's the fun factor and the creative aspect of the vision board needs to be there. You know, it is a fun thing to do. But also just to, in order for it to be the best that it can be and to be that powerful tool, to have the dreaming bit, the visualizing bit, and then the doing bit either side of the design is kind of equally as important.
Yeah. And, you know, with the vision board, if your sort of dream is like going to places where there's a beautiful spa and everything, the feeling of that can be created at home, can't it?
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. There's a key word there, and that is feel.
Yeah.
Because what I talked about in my masterclasses when I used to run these, and the starting point now for me still would be to kind of say to people to let go perhaps of the stuff that we want to have and maybe come inside and ask ourselves, how do we want to feel?
Yeah.
And I think that is a much more powerful kind of connection with our vision and what we want to manifest for ourselves. Because if we can start with how we want to feel, then all of the things that we want to do and the things we want to have will kind of follow on from that.
Yeah.
That makes
Because
sense.
the outside things don't really create the feeling, do they?
Exactly. And it's quite possible that if we start on the outside, we can kind of latch on to things that might give us that short fix, that those kind of temporary feelings. Like happiness is a classic one, isn't it? You know, I want to feel happy, but then focus extrinsically on all the things that we think make us happy.
Yeah.
But actually, if we start on the inside and really focus on exploring what is that feeling of happiness, what does that actually feel like for me, and then what does that look like for me, that's probably a more authentic place to begin.
I just had a thought then. I've seen people say that the mega rich, you know, billionaires are some of the most miserable people they've ever met. And I wonder if it's because they have nothing to really dream about. They think, I want that, and it happens. And everything is external. And in the end, they run out of external things. And nothing is meeting that.
Yeah, I mean, there's sad and depressed rich people, if you like, people that are very wealthy, but there's also very happy people that have very little. So it kind of indicates, doesn't it, that this really comes down to the fact that those feelings and the reality that we create for ourselves happens on the inside, rather than something that we need to go and get that's attached to things. And it's so, I mean, I just want to make it clear as well, it's absolutely okay to want to have, you know, gadgets and big house and car and all of those things are absolutely okay.
Yeah, they are.
It's just about recognizing the kind of the true feelings and the fact that they begin on the inside rather than attaching it to those things.
Yeah. I remember on your masterclass, one of the things that we all talked about was this, the vision board should be from the inside out, not the outside in.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is why I say the starting question. So before we even get to those magazines or the design aspect, which is stage 2 for me, the dream aspect is to really feel into what that vision is for you and what that means for you, and starting from the inside out. So starting with a question like, how do I want to feel? I think, and just journaling around that even can open up so much for you. And this might be, you know, you might think of it in terms of the next few 6 months, you might think of it as, you know, the next year. It's really down to you in terms of what sort of timeline you want to focus your vision on and how big you want that to look. But I think just starting with that very first question and perhaps really kind of feeling into that is the best place.
Yeah. And you know, I think mostly we tend to think of a vision board as like a house we'd like in the future, or a car or a boat or a place to visit. And yet it can encapsulate any vision, can't it?
Absolutely. It could be. I think once we understand how we want to feel, then we get a better sense of who is that person in the future. who is it I want to, I am becoming, and then what are the things I want to be doing to make that happen, and what are the things I'm going to have as a result of that. So you can kind of, I actually choose to separate my vision board, I'm looking at it now, in terms of feel, be, do, have. So I will sit down with my journal and I will say, this is how I visualize I want to feel, and this is who I will become and who I am becoming already. And these are the things I will be doing. And then as a result of that, these are the things that I will have.
Right. So you actually make it a step-by-step process. Actually on the board.
Yeah, like a sort of sections, if you like. It all forms, looking at it as a whole, it's one big vision to me. But just to kind of link those things together so that I'm very clear that actually the things that I'm going to have are really a byproduct of this person that I am becoming. And so take confidence, for example, as a feeling. People often sort of say, I want to feel more confident.
Yeah.
You might spend some time around that in terms of, well, when I step into my confident self in the future, when I visualize that confident me, what are the things I see myself doing, and who am I? Who is that confident person? And I think that really unlocks quite a lot of just like kind of richness in terms of like what you can manifest for yourself.
Yeah, that's it. It constantly strikes me how much time is probably necessary to spend on that initial process.
Yeah. It's funny because people used to say before they came to a masterclass, what do I need to bring? Do I need like magazines? Do I need the glue? Do I need? And I'd be like, no. Don't need any of that, because a lot of that work needs to take place first with ourselves. And so I used to start with a quote. I think it was Abraham Lincoln that says something like, if I had was it 9 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend 6 hours sharpening my axe, or something like that. So for me, it kind of is an indicator that preparation and that work with ourselves and really being clear about this vision and what is it we want for ourselves is a big part of the process, an important part.
Yeah. And I think that can be overlooked when you're using something as a tool. The preparation, so that the tool becomes powerful.
Yeah, I think there's if we do that preparation work, then there's a good chance that tool is going to be a real true creation of and a reflection of us. So if you imagine if you actually skipped out that stage and then went straight to the kind of the magazines or doing the Google images or something, you'd probably then be more likely to just pick out things that you think are attractive to you, but without having that, that initial work in terms of you're sort of making the vision board a reflection of you rather than you fitting into the vision board.
Yeah. So it's just external ideals then. What about interactive vision boards?
Well, this is where I talk a little bit about this in the design stage, which is step 2. And this as well is really interesting. When I started to do more research, what got thrown out was this idea that we have strong preferences in our kind of creativity in the way we operate. So I know there's much more research now to suggest there's many more brains in our body, but if we go to this kind of simplistic idea that there's this left brain, right brain, and it's not that we are one or the other, we use both, but we will have kind of strong preferences.
Yeah.
So like for me, I am very much like an analytical kind of thinker. I like things information organized, which is
Yeah.
why you can sense that my vision board has those 4 compartments, because it's
Yeah.
very, you know, organized in that way, although it's still, that's my way of being creative.
Yeah.
And then you might have, if you're more kind of, you know, the other way, then you might have more of a stronger preference to just be more free flowing. Perhaps even images wouldn't do it for you. You might want something a bit more interactive. You might want to create your own artwork, for example, or and there's all sorts of tools now, isn't there, as well? There's apps, you can do digital boards, you could use Pinterest. So just because it is, you know, known as a vision board doesn't mean it has to fit with that traditional, again, cutting and sticking. It could take many, many forms. It could be words, it could be poetry, it could be flashcards, it could be, I suggested to some of my participants that they attach music to their vision, because they had quite a strong kind of auditory sort of preference.
Yeah, we talked about music.
Yeah, so I think it's really important that, again, even in that design stage, figuring out what is it that makes this vision most powerful for me, because you want to be in connection with that vision every single day.
Yeah.
And so it needs to be, again, something that really connects and speaks to you on, you know, a conscious level as well as a subconscious level as well.
Yeah. And how easy does it need to be to change things on there?
Now, there's different schools of thinking on this. I personally would teach that you need to make that commitment. So make it permanent. There are some people who will say, well, actually, it's okay to kind of change it up. But my preference would be to make it more permanent as possible.
Right.
But, you know, not stopping you from, you know, the fact that you can produce as many of these as you want to as well. So, for example, I've got one that, quite a large one in front of me that represents life in general, but I've actually got a smaller one underneath it that's just about my career and just work. So you could really have, you know, multiple kind of vision boards on the go, if you like. But I would say that I think it's a subliminal message in a way, that if you're making it permanent, you're making that commitment to yourself.
Right. That makes sense. And how easy or hard is it then to implement action?
Wow. I guess it could be as easy or as hard as we want it to be, really. I think, so there's a couple of things with this. There's in setting intentions and there's setting goals.
Right.
Which is something that, again, I've talked about in my previous masterclasses. So this is really, I guess, you're into the step 3, the doing phase. I personally feel that you need to set intentions and have some kind of tangible goals in there as well. Because I know that people talk in the spiritual sense, if you like, in you know, in terms of manifesting. It's important to set intentions, and I agree with that. The intention is, you know, the direction that you are going in. It's the kind of broad sense of, this is what I want. This is what I want to have happen. But the goal for me helps you to kind of break that intention down a bit, because that intention could be quite big. It could feel quite big. And I also think the goal helps you to know when you've got there.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's got that tangibility. So I would say to kind of set some broad intentions, and you can use those, you know, every day. You could perhaps translate them into affirmations, for example, for yourself.
Right.
You could just perhaps, like, I tend, because I've got my vision boards in front of me on my in front of my desk, I look at them every single day. So I'll spend a bit of time, you know, having my cup of coffee or whatever, just looking around them and just connecting with them every day. But then I've also got a lot of what's on there translated into some goals that are written down in other kind of areas, like so some work goals, for example.
Right. And you know, with creating the feeling, if for instance you've got on your vision board this certain place you want to visit, and you're going to drink this certain type of coffee they serve there or something, if you could get that certain type of coffee here and now and start, you know, closing your eyes, drinking that coffee and smelling it, and the first sip is like, this is what it's going to feel like when I'm there, so I've already created this feeling. Is that part of the intention and part of the goal?
Yeah, I think it's really important to help ourselves as much as we can to sort of to make steps towards that and to sort of pave the way. And so say if I mean, going back to the kind of the stuff you want to have, like I said, it's okay to want that. And if there was a, I don't know, particular car, for example, is one that kind of springs to mind, you might want to go and take a test drive, even though, you know, knowing that, you know, right now it might not be within that kind of grasp. But it's about, Stephen Covey says that we create everything twice. We create it in the mind first, and then we create it in reality. So I think if we can continue to kind of create that for ourselves using whatever kind of tools are available and reinforce that vision, it just makes it all the more powerful.
Is there anything that we should avoid doing with creating a vision board?
Aside from obviously what I've kind of already said about not doing the prep work, it might also be around, you know, when we're doing that prep work, I would say to create the right sort of environment for yourself to be able to do that as well. Right. Again, quite and I know this from experience, people can kind of just go, oh crap, okay, I've got 20 minutes now, the kids have gone to bed, I'll just grab some magazines and I'll just sit down and actually it's really important, I think, that we you know, again, it's like honouring that that what it is we want to create, those intentions, by carving out the kind of time and space for us to do that.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important. And if you know, all the better if you can find some quiet time for yourself to sit down, and you might even want, you know, whatever creates that atmosphere for you, you might want to light a candle, or, you know, whatever it is, get your journal, all those sorts of things. Yeah. And I would also say one of the other common asked questions is, can we do this? Can I do this like jointly as a couple or with a family? Right. And again, there's different schools of thoughts on this. I would always say, do it for yourself.
Right. Let each person do it for themselves.
Yeah. And then perhaps if you wanted to then create, you know, if there were some commonalities between them and create one together and get the family involved, then I think that's great. It's a lovely, like I said, it's a fun activity to do as well. But I would always say create for yourself first.
Yeah, yeah. I hadn't even thought about whole families doing it.
Yeah, well, it can be like a really nice fun thing, and a nice introduction as well for children as well, in terms of getting them to think about vision, you know, visioning kind of skills and open up the possibilities for them.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I just hadn't thought about you know, family sitting down and
believe it or not, it's one of the frequently asked questions. Yeah, so I used to put it in the back of my workbook because it was one of those questions that used to come up.
Wow. Okay. Obviously, it didn't come into my head. But with the action taking, how do we deal with our lack of patience in terms of thinking it's there, I feel it, I'm taking action? Why isn't it just here?
Yeah. It's funny because, I mean, you know, of course, I'm a human being as well. I have those blocks and those thoughts. And I was looking at my bigger vision boards the other day and I thought, gosh, when I did this, it was a 12-month vision board. That was almost 3 years ago now. And, you know, I look at it and I think, you know, it feels really good to notice and filter in all of the things that I have manifested on that vision board, even if they're just small steps towards that bigger vision. But I think we just love to like put time scales on things, don't we? And like, oh, shoulding on ourselves, or this should have happened by now, or should be doing this by now. And I would say, I think in the first instance, when you're in that creating mode, if you can let go of some of those kind of expectations, and again, part of the preparation is you might want to do some journaling around if you're hanging on to any of those expectations or any of those thoughts and feelings that might get in the way of you being able to kind of manifest that vision and do the work up front. Then, you know, but I think that's an ongoing process, isn't it, for all of us as human beings? Those thoughts and feelings and niggles do come up. I think it's just about working through them as and when we notice them, because obviously being aware is key. But as and when we notice that that's happening and getting in the way, then just working through and exploring, well, what is that all about? You know, where does this impatience come from? And I would say just regularly, I mean, you talk about this, Jill, about keeping that celebration folder. You know, regularly noticing all of the steps towards and all of the things that you are doing and are making progress towards. That's really important, because we're feeding our brain with the evidence that reinforces those positive beliefs, rather than reinforcing the limiting beliefs around what hasn't happened and what we can't do.
And it seems to be human nature, doesn't it, to straight away focus in on what hasn't happened as opposed to what has.
And the other thing, of course, is also perhaps having an honest conversation as to whether there's anything you might be doing to get in your own way. Because sometimes we also resist, as much as we want to have that vision. And I know that you had Emma on last week talking about imposter syndrome, for example. Sometimes we can get in our own way and not necessarily realise that we're sabotaging ourselves. So if we notice that there might be a possibility that that's happening, then having that honest conversation with ourselves, it may be that we need to kind of go and have a conversation with a coach as well, or get a bit of, you know, just talk it through with a friend or whatever. But I also encourage people to keep an unwilling to-do list.
I love that.
Because the reality is, and if you use that, it's the analogy, isn't it, of the pearl. Apparently the oyster goes through so much pain and like a really long process to produce that beautiful pearl. A lot of the processes that we'll be going through when we're manifesting will be uncomfortable. There will be challenges. That it's not all going to be that kind of plain sailing, is it? And there will be things, if we're honest with ourselves, that we're a bit unwilling to do, that we're, you know, not wanting to kind of step outside our comfort zone and do.
Yeah.
So if we have that unwilling to do list and be really honest with ourselves, like for example, for me, public speaking is one of those, as you know, Jill. It's
Yeah.
one of the things that I'm massively unwilling to do. And if I can talk myself out of it at any point or shy away from it or say no, then I will. But because I'm aware that it's on my unwilling to do list, but really it's part of, on my vision board, I have this person that sat in front of these microphones doing a radio interview. Now, if I want to get to there, then of course doing those public speaking things along the way is something that I need to be willing to do the thing that I'm unwilling to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And what what would you say to somebody if they said, well, I've created my vision board, but there's parts of it on there that I don't believe will ever happen, although I want them to?
Interesting. I mean, I would question, is it there because is this really part of a true, like that internal thing we talked about? Is this really a true picture of what you want to be on your vision board? I would question what is it doing there in the first place. If it is, then I think again it would be around exploring those limiting beliefs. So what is it about that you think is not possible, and what are the reasons for that? What are the reasons that you feel it might not be possible? And I think that might take a bit of deeper exploration actually. So like I said, if it's about working with perhaps a mentor or a coach or somebody that you trust to kind of have that conversation with, I think it would be worth it. But I think once you identify that, it's a block really, isn't it? So once you identify what those are and what those limiting beliefs are, then you can kind of work with them.
It's I was talking to some people yesterday and I said a boulder in the middle of our path doesn't necessarily mean that we shouldn't continue on this path anymore. Sometimes the boulder is there to be climbed over, gone round, or burrowed through or under, or it's just there. It's part of life. And it's interesting as to when something that gets in our way is there to show us a different way, and when it's there just because it's there and we need to get around it, over it, or through it.
See, I would liken that to what I said about my dislike for public speaking. I think to some extent it's always going to be a bit of a boulder on the path. It might shrink over time, erode a bit, as I work with it. But I think it might always be something that's there. But it's kind of like I'm okay with that because I know that there are ways that I can work with it, or I can work around it. So I think, it's recognising. I think there needs to be a level of self-awareness there, doesn't there, really, as to what those might be, and then recognising and acknowledging it, and then sort of exploring how you can work with that.
Yeah, because it's very different, isn't it, to when it's don't keep going on this path, to there's going to be hardships, get on with it.
Yeah, definitely it's not a case of forcing yourself or denying that those things are there, because then it becomes the elephant on the vision board. You want to acknowledge that it is perhaps sort of getting in our way of that kind of manifesting process, but that there is, there are means and ways to work with it.
So if somebody's never created a vision board before, and now they've heard the need for the preparation, and then actually physically doing it, and then taking action on that vision board. How would you advise them to just start the process off?
I would say spend a little bit of time, take your time with this is the first thing. You don't have to, and I really, Jill, that the thing that really frustrates me is the January messages around New Year, New You, setting, you need to do X, Y. There isn't any of that. You manifest 24/7, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year.
Yeah.
So take your time with that initial part of the process. So there's no rush. What if you enjoy journaling, or if journaling is something you feel you could do, then definitely get into your journal and start to explore what these feelings are that you want to feel. And in relation to those feelings, what is it then that you can visualize into the future, you see yourself doing, and the person that you are wanting to become. And if that, if it helps to look at mentors or people that you kind of look up to as well, you could kind of use those as reference points. But really spend some time. If journaling isn't for you, then perhaps you might just want to talk it through with somebody.
Right.
And just, or perhaps there's a Facebook community you might be part of, or somebody that you work with, or somebody you just feel you can have that non-judgmental conversation with.
Yeah.
And just explore it.
You could keep voice notes, couldn't you?
You could also keep, you've talked about this as well before, I know, Jill, but when I'm in the shower, the sort of the downloads that I get, and the vision, a lot of it is visual, I've noticed, at that time in the morning. And it's like somebody needs to invent a notebook that's waterproof, a pen and notebook that you can keep in the shower. Because that, but keeping voice notes or something that captures those little moments, those insights that you have. What I did, I used my counselling course that I'm on now as an example, that this is something that I've been thinking about for about 3 years now. But when I had that first initial thought, I wanted to determine whether this was actually part of my vision, or was it just a thought? Was it just a fleeting? So I just kind of left it. I just sat with it and thought, well, let's just see. But that thought kind of kept popping back in, and then it kind of got stronger, and then this vision sort of started to come with it as well. So I would say, also just make notes of things like that, and just perhaps leave them to kind of bubble away a bit and see how things evolve for you, whether you really can see this as part of your vision.
So it's not like fast action, is it?
No, it's not something that has to be done like in 24 hours or something, or just because it's the new year. In fact, I would say I go quite dormant sort of January, February time, and those are my reflective months, actually. Those are the months where I'm thinking back to what's gone well, but then what are the sort of some of the things I might think about for the next year or so. And I find this actually happens for lots of people then sort of towards the springtime, with that promise of kind of newness. That's where the energy kind of flows in a bit more. So that might be a good time to then create the board itself.
That's brilliant. I mean, we can't be in that creative space and doing all of the time, can we?
No.
We need that self-nurture time as well.
Absolutely. And which is why also I say, I think, having maybe a loose timeline is good, but I think letting go as well of those pressures of I need to have done it by this date is a little bit, I think, counterproductive. And I think if we're honest with ourselves as human beings, it's probably counterintuitive, isn't it? I don't think humans are necessarily made to operate in that Monday to Friday 9 till 5 kind of deadline driven sort of world, really.
No, it's not really been true to the nature of who you are, is it? I mean, okay, there's a few who thrive in that. And it's right for them. But it's putting everybody into one box, isn't it?
Yeah. So I think if you know, I mean, you will know best intuitively what works for you in that whole kind of goal setting process as well. And some people like completely shy away from the word goal itself, you know, has kind of connotations, doesn't it? So whatever works for you, an indication, an aim, an objective, call it whatever you want, but just make sure that I think it's right for you at the end of the day.
And there's a lot of almost pressure around, especially today, and like especially in schools, I think, to all be the same, to fit in. And a vision board takes you right outside of that, doesn't it?
It does, and I think that's why that very first step as well is also important, because it really goes, like we said, from the inside out. So this is a reflection of you, your uniqueness as well. And even in the design element of it, it's like it doesn't have to be that traditional vision board, does it? It's got to reflect you again, and your personality and your creativity. So yeah, totally blow the mold wide open.
I mean, it really takes you into that place of who am I at a completely individual level.
Yeah, which is why I think I always prefer to apply the coaching style, like with the masterclass. Even though it was a masterclass, I didn't exactly teach it as such. I kind of gave people the steps and the principles, but then it's about sort of a little bit of self-coaching, really, and just giving you the tools to be able to coach yourself through that.
You gave the steps to do it, but left it open to each person's individual style and interpretation of that.
Yeah, we had some really interesting creations as well.
Yeah. But I'm going to have a quick look, see if there's any. Oh, we've got, you know, I always stick completely with what I'm listening. Emma's with us.
Hello.
Carolyn's with us. Natalie.
Hello.
Carolyn said, like, get over the blank page syndrome. And then she says she gets it. She likes the unwilling to do. And and she likes the elephant on the vision board. And Emma said all the best ideas come in the shower.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, and Carolyn was going to invent waterproof notebooks when she was a child.
Oh, wow. Somebody needs to do it, I'm telling you, because it's like, it could be one of those ones that you stick on the tiles, couldn't it?
Yeah.
So when you have those ideas, you just
put it in the bar. So yeah. Yeah.
I think you should put that on your vision board, Carolyn, and make it happen.
Yeah, we'll all get involved.
I'd buy one.
There you are. You got a sale already, Carolyn. And Emma said, I do think things need to percolate sometimes.
Definitely.
And that's another thing. When we do the vision board, when does it move from being percolating to procrastinating?
Ooh. Yeah, good question. from percolating to procrastinating. I might have to write that into the workbook, actually. It does kind of link in, doesn't it, with what we were saying about being honest with ourselves and knowing when we're kind of getting in our own way.
Yeah.
It may be happening on an can't get my words out.
Unconscious level.
Unconsciously, yeah, that we're not actually fully aware that we're kind of getting in our own way.
And what about perfectionism?
Oh, that's something I could talk about for sure.
Never starting it until every detail's perfection in our head before we actually put it on the board.
Yeah, I'm a reformed perfectionist, aka Monica, and it's an ongoing thing for me. Actually, it's an ongoing something that I work with, and I think perfectionism actually is deemed as a negative thing, but it can actually be a real positive,
right?
In terms of wanting to kind of do the best. That's the intention behind perfectionism, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
Well, it is for me anyway.
Yeah.
But I think actually life is far from perfect.
And
so if the vision is a reflection of life in general and what we want our lives to be, then there has to be a sense of just starting where you're at and just allowing yourself to kind of move through that messy, imperfect process of creating, I think. I don't know if what would you add to that, Jill, on perfectionism?
Well, what you don't want from perfectionism is it stopping you to do things. You don't want it to stop life, to stop work, to stop creating, to stop you actually having a vision board.
Yeah. There's never going to be the perfect vision board, like there isn't the perfect, there isn't the perfect website or the perfect this, that and the other, which is what I've learned in business. So it is a case of just starting from where you are.
Yeah.
I don't know, perhaps the perfectionist might argue that their vision board needs to be less fixed, that they do want to have that flexibility to change up the images and things like that. I think the danger of that is that you could end up chopping and changing and making it so perfect all of the time that you get away from the doing.
Yeah. I wonder if somebody, say, that really sort of had this desire to have, say, a Ferrari, and they were afraid to put the Ferrari on the vision board, so they put a Mini on there, and then they get the Mini and they think, oh, I got the Mini, what could I get next? And build up to the Ferrari by seeing actually things starting to happen, the steps they're making actually get them the Mini. And then they say, oh, now I want, I can't think of where you'd go from next on that, but the
private jet.
The next step to but still afraid to put a Ferrari on there.
I think it kind of comes back to the feeling as well, of what is the feeling that you want to have from this new car. Do you get the same feeling from a brand new Mini as you would a Ferrari? Really exploring that, and what is it, the Ferrari, what are we looking for in that car versus what is the feeling that we actually want to have on the inside, and are there other ways that we can actually get that feeling as well?
Yeah.
But I think also, equally, there's nothing wrong with kind of chunking things down for yourself as well. So if that Ferrari did feel overly scary and like, oh my gosh, that vision is so far into the future, it feels huge, then perhaps chunking it down, into, well, perhaps in the next couple of years, it feels more comfortable that I could get to here, then I don't think there's anything wrong with that approach either.
Yeah. And Natalie asked, this is for you, I think this is for you. Have you had to adjust your vision board during COVID?
Ooh. I haven't adjusted it, and I'll tell you probably why, and that's, I'm looking at it right now, just assessing. A lot of what I have on my work vision board, and actually the general life one, is around the feelings. It's around, so if I look at my general one, I've got confidence and calm and happiness and success, gratitude. So all of those feelings I can get for myself regardless of whether there's a pandemic going on or not.
Yeah.
And to some extent, and people that know me in terms of my business and what I've been up to in the last 6 months know that I've probably manifested more in my business, and taken those side steps around the rock, the boulder, because I've actually been in a place of creating more space and time for myself to just chill and kind of let go of the how and just move with the process, and just, trust is a big part of this, isn't it?
Yeah. It really is. There you are, Natalie.
I'll share some pictures in the comments later on of the ones that I'm referring to on the wall.
Yeah. I know you showed us when we did the masterclass your vision board,
and I think I'm feeling like probably after Christmas at some point, or towards the spring, that I will revisit these now, because a lot of what I've got on here I feel like I have got there, or I'm very close to getting there. So I probably will churn out some new creations.
Yeah, I mean that's the other thing. If you've actually achieved what's on the vision board, you would need to change it then, wouldn't you?
And it really does depend on how big you want to make it. Some people might have this whole self-actualization going on of, this is the big dream, and that could take a long time. I've heard stories of there's a guy that put this whole kind of huge lifestyle and mansion and career that he wanted to have, and then came across that vision board after he moved into his new house and realised that it was almost the same house that he had on his vision board, and that was like decades on.
Wow.
So but then, so my work one, because I know that things are moving quite quickly for me, and things are in a constant state of change, that I tend to have that as perhaps a 12-month, 2-year thing.
Right.
I don't hold myself to that, but I know that it's more likely that I'm going to want to change it again,
right,
in the not too distant future.
So you could create a vision board for, you could say this is my 12-month vision board, or this is my lifetime vision board, or
yeah,
this is my vision board for the next month.
I've heard of people creating a whole wall of the lifetime stuff, but being really creative with it, but because again it's stuff that they see and absorb every day.
That's incredible. I'd never thought of it actually being adjustable to different timelines as well.
Yeah, I think again it comes back to what I said about the coaching approach. For me, it's doing what's right for you on that, what feels okay for you even. Is that 10-year thing a bit like, oh, too much? you know, or is it like, does it make you feel excited? So yeah, I think what feels good for you.
And the other thing with 10 years is, could it make you feel like, oh, that's 10 years, I've got bags of time, so I don't really have to worry about doing anything yet because it's like so far away.
Which is where the goals do come in though. So setting the intentions around the vision board are great, but for me, I think breaking it down into those goals as well and having those written down in places that you access them will constantly keep you moving on that path. You won't forget the doing aspect. And that's what I would also say is, once you've created your masterpiece, whatever it is, whether it's digital, on your, you know, board or whatever, just have it somewhere that you can connect with it on a regular basis, that you can, preferably every day, but if not, you know, if it's a screensaver on your laptop or if it can go on your wall or something, there's nothing worse than doing all of that work and then just shoving it under the bed or on top of the wardrobe and for it to just sort of gather dust.
And could it be a playlist?
It could be, yeah, it could be. So going back to the feelings, if, like I said, if it speaks to your brain in terms of having those feelings from the music, combined with words and pictures, if you want to, then yeah, just the vision board world is your oyster.
Oh, this has been so great. I don't know whether there's no more questions. So you've obviously answered everybody. So I know you've got to start thinking about getting offline ready for your college.
Yeah, speaking of manifesting.
So, but thank you ever so much for joining me today, and thank you everybody who's been here. And we're going to stop the live stream now so that we don't let Louise get stressed and be rushing around and gets time to get a drink before she's on college.
Thank you.
So we're going to say bye-bye.
Oh.